All right, welcome to this episode of Silverback Publishing's In Conversation with Steve Stratton, as we get a look beyond the page in anticipation of the release of his novella, A Warrior's Path. I am your host, Adair, and today Steve and I are joined with the best-selling duo of Andrews and Wilson. Gentlemen, thank you so much for your time.
Oh yeah, thanks for having us. Anything for you guys?
Aw, thank you. I know time is precious, so we're going to get right to it. And as we were kind of talking about before we got started, I did a little research getting ready to chat with everybody today, and I couldn't help but notice all of you gents have decided to give us your protagonist, if for me, protagonist's origin story in the form of a novella. So, Steve, you gave us Lance Beowulf's origin in A Warrior's Path, and then Brian, Jeff, we got John Dempsey's origin in Scars. So, I'm going to start with Brian, Jeff. Did you plan for Dempsey's origin to be a novella, or did it kind of just play out that way?
I mean, I don't think we planned for it we have a lot of stuff that we do. So people tend to think that we're like really organized, structured people, and nothing could be further from the truth. So it's not like we partnered to write the Tier 1 series with the idea that 3 years from now we're going to do a novella. I think that the idea sort of sprung out of a lot of emails that we get from fans about, Grimes and Dan Munn and where do they come from and what have they done. And so we had this opportunity to write Dempsey's in Scars and make it almost as much a thank you to the fans. We made it available for free to fans that signed up for our newsletter for a long time. So it was almost more a love letter to the fans than it was anything in our case. You agree with that, Brian?
Yeah, and if you when you read the opening chapter, in fact, I think it's in the first paragraph of Tier 1. The first thing we talk about when we're physically describing John Dempsey is he has this serpentine scar that wraps around his forearm. And in that opening sequence, the scar is bleached and old, and it's something that he looks at, and it's a metaphor for him as a character. And this was an opportunity for us to go back and like explain that little Easter egg, how to get it. And so that was sort of fun. We like to find opportunities to put in these little elements into our stories and not always explain them and then explain them later for people. So it's fun.
Well, as a fan, I sincerely appreciate you guys doing something like that, because that is phenomenal. And that's, not something everybody gets when you get a novella. You don't get that kind of interaction with fandom. Now, Steve, your novella, you're going to have some interaction with the fans, but we got 2 full-length novels before we got Wolf's origin. You got a new series coming out, so can we expect the same for Snowman?
Well, there wasn't a planned timing for that. It was more, readers saying, I'd like to understand more about Lance. And as a writer, I was learning more. It's not so much about the action, but the characters, right, in my writing journey. And I hope I improved that in the second book. But at that time, it was like, I'd like to deep dive Lance too, and Lance Beowulf, and bring that story forward. So it was book 3 at the editor. It was just sort of a blank time. I don't know what to do with blank time, so I had to fill it up with write a novella. So
Okay, well, I mean,
Did you, I got a question for you, Steve. Did you feel like, and this is something we experienced when we wrote Scars, when you meet Dempsey in Tier 1, he's much further down his operator journey. And when you go back in the Scars, he's a younger man and his personality is different, his experiences are different. Did you find that sort of in your Warrior's Path experience that, wait a minute, I'm having to go back and imagine this character before I met him the first time?
Oh, absolutely. I went back to, he was 14 when his biological father died on the reservation from a heroin overdose. So I was able to intertwine that dislike, maybe hatred, need for revenge with the cartels early on in his life as a theme that was running through, not absorbing him 100% when he's 18 or joining the military, things like that, but always there. And it's always pushing the envelope to find that, get back on that beam and on the bubble to, get after a cartel. So it was interesting to weave that through.
and super fun, right? Like I know for us, like I think we understood Dempsey in the book we wrote. I think we wrote the fourth, maybe it was the fifth book after we wrote Scars, and I found him easier to write. Like it's like I get him a little better now. It's like a friendship that you've been friends for a long time, and then you go on a vacation together, and you either decide that's my best friend or I'm never going to see them again. But you get to know them in a different way, right? And so it became so much easier to read. Did you feel that way? Like so much easier to write Dempsey now because I get him better than I did before?
Oh, absolutely. It's like a 36,000 word character profile, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah.
No,
That's
perfect. It is. And it made me actually go back to all my characters in this new series and write really detailed character profiles. So all the ticks, what do they wear? You know, little things. Do they have something in their pocket all the time? So it drove a lot of different behavior that I think will help me connect the characters to the readers going forward.
you and Brian should go camping because I don't do any of that. I don't do any of that character study stuff. That's what
Well, with Steve, I'm imagining like this beautiful mind kind of board of just things that only he understands and some sort of coded language with, crisscrosses and arrows and probably even encoded, since I know Steve is a bit of a tech nerd, which we'll get into later, so bear with me. But as jumping around, guys, Tier 1, Sons of Valor, The Shepherds, your own projects, then W.E.B. Griffin, Tom Clancy. I'm kind of like my head's spinning just thinking about how you try to keep up with all the different worlds and characters. So that being said, do you have any lessons learned that you'd be willing to share with Steve as he's taking on this second series?
Well, outlining is very important. I'm going to show you an example. This is how the sausage is made. Okay. Here's an example. I'm just going to show it briefly of what our outlines look like. So that's the key to the whole thing, Steve. If you just really put it that level of work and detail into it. No, I mean, I think Steve's a lot like us, and you too. You're like this too. We've spoken a lot about character. These it's almost more you either have to do one or the other. You have to be that organized, structured outline, the board like you were talking about, or you have to be that very high EQ kind of immature, I'm hanging out with these imaginary people in my backyard kind of guy. And I think Brian and I sort of fall into that category. Now, Brian does do real work and profiles of people, but I think most of what we do is just that, Steve. We just hang out with these people that become so real that eventually you're typing and John Dempsey's behind you going, dude, I would not do that. You're like, oh, I'm sorry, John. And you fix it. So, and I don't know how you get that. I think you're either born with that psychopathy or you're not. I don't think there's another way around it.
That's a good point, because I started off being super organized because I was trying to get the structure down and all the points and set the scene, just learn the craft. And I did have yellow stickies across these bookcases with 1,600 cookbooks that my wife has, and it looked like a crime scene, kind of thing with twine and everything. And now I've sort of got an outline, and I do relate to these people, and I have them in my head, and I can just write, and I'm literally pantsing. I never thought I'd say that word, but I'm just. She sort of looks like that. Maybe has a couple ideas for 10 chapters because I write in 10 chapter sections. And then I just go off, and then it's like, oh, wait a minute, I can go here. Oh, I can do that, and so it's actually where I thought I had, discipline and discipline is freedom, right? In the structure. Now I've sort of let go of that. And number one thing, by the way, that I've learned from these two guys here is what if? And that leads everything I do now. What if? And that is such a blessing to be able to think like that and just suck in ideas from all over. So thank you, guys.
Well, I'm just
Yeah, I
delighted
think that
Jeff,
we invented that question, right, Jeff? That we'll take credit for that. That was us. Yeah.
I'm just delighted that Jeff outlines the same way I do. So I mean that was pretty intense right there. That was brilliant.
Yeah, it blows you away, right? Yeah.
I thought it was classified and highly redacted is what I thought. But
But I mean, I think the fun part when what you're getting into there, though, Steve, and what Jeff was saying is that the story's going to go where the story's going to go. And for us, I think part of the joy of the writing is we don't know. It's sort of like a road trip that you say, well, we're going to take a road trip with the family to Florida. Our ultimate destination, let's say, is Disney. But, we're going to kind of leave it open as to what happens and how we get there. And, the stories are sort of like that. I mean, we know who's on the road trip with us. We know our characters, but we don't know what they're going to do, what they're going to say during the journey. And so and sometimes you think ultimately you're going to Disney and you end up going somewhere else. And so, I mean, I think it would be a little more, you use the word, discipline. And I think, if you're too disciplined, you lose some of that fun.
Agreed.
I mean, that's hands down. It's like we all have friends that we know through and through, but we also all have that one friend that, if the crazy thing's going to happen, it's going to happen to them. And if you weren't there to see it, you would never believe it. So that's kind of what I equate these pages to for all of us. Now, Steve, I couldn't help but notice that similar to what Brian and Jeff did with like Tier 1 and Sons of Valor, your first 2 series are in the same world. So are you going to stay in this world you've created, or are there going to be other adventures you're going to be delving into?
Yeah, I like the idea of spreading out, specifically more into the techno thriller. I am a geek, and I read a lot about technology and things like that. So there, and I'm including some of that in the Snowman series, right? She's my protagonist there, guys, is a deaf female psychiatrist. She wears a cochlear implant, so DARPA, Google Glasses, cochlear implants, satellites, different modalities of communication. I have to stop at a certain point because I know some things that are SIPR and above, but kind of things. But yeah, it's fun. It's fun to go out down that path.
That's a good segue. I mean, where Lance Beowulf is, he's indigenous. He is grounded in his cultural heritage. You, as the self-described techno geek, how did you resist not giving him like all the toys, like every toy you could think of that's not classified? And there's got to be something that you've researched that you're dying to use.
Well, and Brian and Jeff have talked about it and written about it in both Sandbox and 4 Minutes, and AI, of course, and so Lance and the team have Providence is their